It was always Peter, James, and John whom Jesus wanted by his side when things got real. They were to witness the raising of the daughter of Jairus, the transfiguration, and Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. Whether we consider this as a singular honor and proof of his trust in them, or maybe something else, is up for debate. It seems equally possible that he just wanted to keep them close and out of trouble. After all, Peter was somewhat impulsive and prone to jump to the wrong conclusion. But Peter would also someday lead the church. And the sons of thunder, James and John, well, they had some anger management issues. Maybe Jesus knew that these three were going to need some extra help if they were ever going to fulfill their role in the kingdom. James, as I have already shared, was the first among them to die. John, his brother, was the last, and is therefore believed to have been the youngest of all the disciples. While Jesus and the others might have been in their 30s when his public teaching began, John was probably just a young man. Jesus literally took him under his wing in order to teach him lessons he would need to know. The fourth gospel refers to John 6 times as the beloved disciple, or the disciple whom Jesus loved. Before you get the wrong idea, Greek has 5 words for love, and this is not eros. Instead, the words used here imply brotherly love and deep affection. Since, in fact, this gospel was likely written by John, or at the very least by someone who knew him well, that also implies that John knew beyond a doubt that Jesus loved him. And so he portrayed himself in the story as the beloved disciple. How wonderful to have such a person in your life, someone who loves and cares about you. For many, that is a mother or a father or a sister or brother. But for John, it was Jesus. Those who know Jesus also know that the capacity of Jesus to love is unlimited. John experienced that love firsthand as a young man in order that he might also tell others about God's love. His experiences with Jesus convinced him that this love was special. This love was eternal. Of course, the moment when things truly got real for John was Good Friday, when Jesus was nailed to the cross. Every other disciple had fled and was hiding in fear that they might be next. John alone was there at the foot of the cross, standing alongside of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And an extraordinary thing happened there. Jesus saw John and said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then said to John, "Here is your mother." And we are told that from that hour, the disciple took her into his home, probably for the rest of her life. Was this then Jesus's way of providing for the care of his elderly mother, because he himself would not be there to do so? Maybe. But it also seemed just as likely that John needed Mary in his life and her love. After all, Jesus quite literally asked Mary to treat John as her own son now. Jesus gave them to each other. There is little reason to doubt that he actually had the welfare of both of them in mind when Jesus did so. On the day of resurrection, Peter and John were together when Mary Magdalene came in and told them that the stone had been rolled back and the tomb was empty. Peter and John literally ran to the tomb, with John arriving first and Peter right behind. John was peering in when Peter got there and barged right past him, as usual. Both saw the linen wrappings that had held the body of Jesus still lying there in place. But it was John who saw and believed, so we are told. Peter, it seems, still had a ways to go to catch up with John. Thereafter, in the book of Acts, we often see Peter and John together as leaders of the church. In fact, they got to spend some quality time together in prison. When told that they must stop preaching about Jesus or else, together they replied, "Which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him? As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard." John also traveled with Peter to Samaria to see for themselves the new believers there. And then John stayed for quite a while to help give that new church a good foundation. We're not sure exactly when John started to write his gospel. He is probably the author, although some scholars argue it could also have been someone else, maybe someone who knew John and had listened to him tell the stories of Jesus over and over again. The Gospel of John was certainly written long after the other Gospels and is clearly different from them. In many ways, the Gospel of John is more commentary on the life of Jesus than it is history. It contains some unique stories, but it also contains unique insight into the very nature of Jesus. It is written in a peculiar Greek style of narrative writing, one which is less concerned about reporting facts than telling the truth of the matter with a capital T. John's goal was to share the truth of Christ. So his gospel contains much that you will not find in the other more straightforward accounts of what happened. But we think most of the Gospel of John was finished by around 75 AD. But of course, it also seems to have a story that was added on later, a story of the resurrected Jesus set on the Sea of Galilee. Notably in this story, Peter is somewhat redeemed from his failure to stand up for Jesus when he had the chance to do so in Jerusalem. Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" And Peter answers 3 times, "Yes," echoing the 3 times that he had claimed not to even know Jesus on the night before Jesus was crucified. In this story, Jesus then warned Peter that one day he was going to die a martyr's death. So Peter then asked Jesus, "Well, what about John?" Either from concern or just curiosity. In essence, Peter wanted to know if John would suffer the same fate. Jesus replied, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me." Each of the apostles had their own path to tread. Each of them had to follow Jesus in their own way. The author also adds that because of this story, the rumor spread among the brothers and sisters that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die. This is a clue that at least this addendum was added sometime after John too had died. From almost all accounts, he died a peaceful death. I tend to believe that John was indeed the author of the gospel that bears his name, and it is not impossible that John wrote the book of Revelation too. The language and style are very different, however, leading many scholars and even many of the early church fathers to attribute the book of Revelation to a different John, of which there are actually several, now known as John the Evangelist, John the Elder, John of Patmos, and John the Apostle, each of whom gave much to the early church, each in their own way. Universally, there is also one letter in the New Testament that almost everyone agrees must have been written by John the Apostle. In it, we hear echoes of the Gospel of John as well. "I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in darkness and walks around in darkness. They do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them." Light and darkness was this theme as well in the Gospel of John, and in his life too. There is a legend that in his old age, others would carry John into the gathering and ask him to speak. Then he would inevitably say to them, "Little children, love one another." Eventually, someone asked him why he only said this to them and nothing else. Because, he answered, if you do only this, then it will be enough. John saw in Jesus truth with a capital T. John saw Jesus as the light of the world and the way to live your life. This is how we know we are in him, so he wrote. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Good advice still. As for the rest of John's story, well, there are many other legends. But as the Gospel of John says, this is the disciple who is testifying to these things and has written them, and we know that his testimony is true. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. To which I would only add this. His story is still being written by the things that we do in his name, just because he has loved us. Be safe, and God bless you.